Photography Daily.
The book I've written now is, I studied psychology at university, that was my degree. So I've always had a fascination with people and how they think, what motivates us, what drives us.
A warm welcome today is extended to Sean Tucker, a reasonably regular contributor and guest of the show now, to talk this time about his upcoming book, The Meaning in the Making. Some light philosophy for anyone who's ever said why when it comes to trying to work out what creativity means to them.
I think the minute people hear the word philosophy, they think complicated or like ivory tower thinking or just is going to go over most people's heads or require a ton of patience.
I've been looking forward to chatting with Sean about this book because I'm a maker of stuff. In my case, photos, films and podcasts. And he might even include the work I do in my workshop, making stuff out of wood, I guess.
It's not for photographers specifically or exclusively. It's for filmmakers and poets and writers and dancers and actors and anybody who makes anything of any sort.
We talk about the mental well-being we get when we've made something like a photo that we're particularly proud of.
Yeah, I think we all feel that way, don't we? I think ask anyone who makes anything. It changes your state when you've made something that you're proud of, that you're happy with. It lifts you.
Inevitably, there'll be a little news of Sean's plans for his YouTube channel.
The other thing that will change slightly is that one of my favorite things to do on my channel is to do documentaries with other photographers about their process. And now that things are opening up from COVID, hopefully more permanently, or at least on some level, that I'll be able to get back to that.
We talk about the joy of writing.
There's a permanence to writing, and this might be only in my own head. I sort of feel like the videos that I produce, even though this probably isn't true, but they're a bit more disposable. They go past and they get left behind. But putting something down in a book that this is what me as this individual human being thinks about this topic at this point in time.
This book has come at a challenging point in Sean's life, and he's candid about that today.
Yeah, I mean, on the one side, it was difficult because I'm very grateful in a way that my wife left when she did, because she left as I finished writing it. I don't know if I would have been in the headspace for a little while.
Emotion is certainly a focus of today's chat.
I've got a chapter just called Feel, which talks about sort of the emotional side of how we make. And I'm a more rational-brained human being, admittedly, but I know it has to be the balance between our rational mind and our emotional state that we make from if we want to make good things. And if we're weak on one side, we need to work on the other.
And for photographers listening who may be thinking, why is my relationship with what I love doing changed? There are some thoughts.
I just met with someone this week. We were sitting down and he's going, I feel like I've lost that early passion I had when I first got that camera. And I got it for Christmas and I went out, I just took photographs every day and I made a visual mess and I loved it.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today that photographer, filmer and writer and maker is Sean Tucker.
I also hope that they feel really excited about the idea that going forward, that they can have a better handle on themselves as a maker and be more self-aware. I think self-awareness is a big thing, I hope, that comes out of this book.
Patron of the day today is Dennis Skyam from Denmark, whose work is stunning. I'll link to him, as ever, in the show notes. He's one of those photographers whose work I look at and wonder, now why didn't I see it that way? I mean, I was in the same place. I just didn't see what he saw. Which always reminds me to continue to repeat the mantra the late photographer Dear Steve Shipman passed on from his photographic mentor and teacher. You're looking, but you're not seeing. Dennis is a photographer who does this for the love, not for the like. And by that I mean I learned recently that he'd shut down his 100,000 follower Instagram account because he didn't want to feel that he had to feed the machine, or feel the pressure that I think he's bestowed upon somebody who's built any kind of following. And this might be what my wife jokingly calls husband looking, but on his website I didn't see a link to his newish account. Dennis's observations are a dance of leading lines and many silhouetted characters, kind of mystery players in his street works, and I love them. So let me sound all soft and mushy about those who placed faith in this podcast as our patrons, like Dennis, but sincerely, one of the joys of doing this Patron of the Day thing isn't just to say your name and provide a link, and it's certainly not to sound like an ad break, The joy is genuinely and really to get involved and stuck in, immersed, if you like, in what you make and really looking at it. In the same way that each morning now, I don't start my day in the office until I've studied a book in the modest library just behind me for at least a quarter hour with some starter fuel strength coffee and a Garibaldi, with nobody shouting, "Oi, you haven't even had your breakfast yet." From the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons are so important to helping maintain a future for this cast. I'll tell you how you can become one later on. And before we go to Sean, here's a question. Is there a piece of camera kit in a cupboard, in one of those camera bags you've not looked in for a while, or tucked into a drawer, a lens, a flash, a camera that you just haven't used lately? For some reason you're holding on to it, but you don't know why, or you've forgotten you even had it. Well, now is the time to turn that old kit into cash. If you're in the US, Europe or the UK and you can spare just a few minutes, because that's all it takes, go to mpb.com and sell it using the simple process on the front page. You'll end up with cash that you can either pocket or, of course, trade on the site for kit you'd much rather have instead. And you'll be part of driving the circular economy. And that helps the planet, which has to be a win-win. So today's guest is Sean Tucker, who is, I'll freely admit, one of my favourite YouTubers. Whilst he does make shows about the tech nature of what we do, he's not an unboxer, and his love of producing content for that platform takes you to such recent titles as Stuck Between the Old and New, all about life as much as the discipline of making photos. There's Getting Over Creative Block, and then one about envy. What? Where are all the latest cameras? And why I switched from one brand to another, to which I'm guilty as charged, personally. Yes, he does do a few tutorials, but they're more than balanced by films that mention the word legacy. And in my mind, that ticks every box about why I'd choose to watch a film about photography, or photographers. In many respects, when I released this podcast a year and one day ago, I'll freely admit that it was Sean's approach to his film channel, and a very early episode recorded with him, that directed my course firmly toward the why over the how. And then a month ago, he released a trailer for this book.
Why are human beings driven to make? It's as if we collectively intuited, long before science gave us the language, that the universe bends toward entropy, and every act of creation on our part is an act of defiance in the face of that evolving disorder. When we pick up a paintbrush, or compose elements through our camera viewfinders, or press fingers into wet clay to wrestle form from a shapeless lump, we are bending things back toward order and wrestling them from chaos. But making things is often not enough. We also want the things we make to be filled with meaning. We're each trying to describe what we know about life, to create a collective sense of safety in numbers. When we reach the end of our traditional descriptive powers, it's time to weave collective meaning from poetry, painting, writing, dancing, photographing, filmmaking, storytelling, singing, designing, performing, carving, sculpting, and a million other ways we daily create order out of the chaos and share it with each other for comfort. On this journey, we need a creative philosophy which will help us find our voice, discover our message, deal with the responses to our work, maintain inspiration, and stay mentally healthy and motivated creators as we strive to find the meaning in the making.
So today I'm going to talk to Sean Tucker about being creative, and hopefully it's going to inspire you along the way to keep going with your own making. Sean Tucker. It's probably important to say, because though I suspect most, if not all the audience listening will know you, Sean, have heard of you, will have come into contact with you through a photography film, or indeed through this podcast. They'll know of your background with the church and your rocky relationship at times with it. Is this well, I hope I've said that correctly, because it does feel like that when you talk about it. Is this book a manifestation of all that time learning to sort of sharing your philosophy from the pulpit? I mean, it's not as if you haven't had your work published, but this is something of a step away from sharing the shadows of the places you walk photographically through, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely links strongly with all that. I mean, I wrote a book 10 years ago that wasn't published. It was just me self-publishing it, putting it out about why I left the church and why I wasn't going back. But what I felt about it, what I thought about it, and why I did still think it could be a force for good in the world. And that was good practice for what I've done with this book. But I think that the difference between the two is when I wrote that book before, and I don't really advertise that book or talk about it very much because I wrote it for a really specific audience. I was talking to people who were in churches, so they knew that language, and I was talking in that language. But they were frustrated thinking, hang on, this is about all the wrong stuff, kind of confirming that. And I suppose in a way, which is why the church didn't like it, I was just sneaking people out the back door with it. So in a way, I mean, you could argue I wrote that first book for no one because people in the church didn't want to hear that kind of stuff, being critical of the church, and people outside the church couldn't care less. So it's like landed in the middle of no one being interested in it. But it was really important for me to write it almost as like catharsis, because it actually came out of me going to a counselor at the time when my career with the church fell apart, and sitting with him for 6 months of retelling the story of the 10 years that I worked for the church and going through what was my fault, what was other people's fault, what was just because the church is a bit of a messed up institution, what's just because life is complicated, and so separating all that stuff out. And as I was doing that writing for myself, I realized this might be a good book. But it's even kind of like the book I've written now it draws from stuff way earlier than that as well, because I studied psychology in university. That was my degree. So I've always had a fascination with people and how they think, what motivates us, what drives us. Then definitely after that, moving into the church, spirituality gets rolled into my thinking there as well. And then moving beyond the church and starting to look at spiritualities around the world and what's in common, and then starting to read some of the philosophers, and then starting to read people like Joseph Campbell, who goes around and starts collating all the stories we tell in different cultures and what are the commonalities between them, and what does that tell us about what we value as human beings and how we live our stories, and drawing from the stuff I learned in psychology with Jung and archetypes. And so all this kind of mess of stuff, I feel like since I've become a photographer and got into the creative journey and talking to creatives in my YouTube channel, this book was an attempt to roll everything that's come before into something that's not as complicated as I'm making it sound, but something that's user-friendly as a creative to help you sort of stay on track, stay motivated, stay inspired, keep yourself fresh with ideas, dealing with, the ups and downs of any creative journey.
Because I know that this interview, of all those that I've prepped for, and we've talked a good few times now in interviews, you and I feel I've had Sean Tucker practice at, if ever you could with somebody that you regularly talk with. But of all those that I've prepped for, this has been one of the more challenging ones, because I started to question, Sean, whether I'm philosophical enough to be asking the questions, whether I'd quickly be uncovered to use one of the analogies you have in your book, actually, whether I'd be uncovered as a cave painter rather than a real oil and trowel painter. Who is the book aimed at? Will I understand it?
Well, you see, this is the thing, is like, I think the minute people hear the word philosophy, they think complicated, or like ivory tower thinking, or just is going to go over most people's heads, or require a ton of patience. And for me, I think that's bad philosophy, because philosophy, I mean, the root word is just, philos was just in Greek was brotherly love. Mm-hmm. And Sophie is Sophia is wisdom. So it's just a lover of wisdom. That's what philosophy means. And you can think about it like any philosopher worth his salt through the generations was just someone who was trying to hack life. They were trying to work out, how can I make this life less complicated for myself, not more complicated, not more, ivory tower. I have to be so intelligent to think about this stuff, but practical, fingers in the dirt. How do I work out how to make my life better, less anxious, less complicated? So the Stoics and, Plato or Socrates or whoever it was back in the day that we think of as like grand philosophers, to the people in their day, the reason they had so many followers and people hanging on their every word, and why people, I think it was Socrates who was put to death because he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens. He spoke to kids. Those are the people who understood him, which meant that what he said was very accessible. It's only now that we sort of try and directly translate it that maybe it's been a step removed. But I think all philosophy should be grounded. So the book is for anyone who does anything creative. It's not for photographers specifically or exclusively. It's for filmmakers and poets and writers and dancers and actors and anybody who makes anything of any sort. It's for you to practically think about how you keep making things well and how you keep your mental state in a healthy space.
And does that mean that then, I know you've talked about this before, that your YouTube channel, as you've always loved when it's more about the why than the how. Does this mean that you as a creator now are going to go down, you're already on a philosophical road because you talk about that in your trailer anyway, but will it become more philosophical still? Do you think you might leave altogether that avenue of trying to explain how the perfect portrait is made?
Maybe. I think there'll probably be less of it because, and I'll still do tutorials every now and again because I know they're helpful to people, one, and two, being a little bit mercenary, I know it's what brings in a new audience because people on YouTube use it like a search engine. They want to search a question that they're stuck on. So they might find how to shoot a portrait with one speed light, but they'll stay for the other stuff, or a proportion of them will. So I'll still do those every now and again. I'll definitely lean in a little bit more to the philosophical side because I think writing the book's given me permission to do that in terms of this is me setting out my stall for what comes next. The other thing that will change slightly is that one of my favorite things to do on my channel is to do documentaries with other photographers about their process. Yeah. And now that things are opening up from COVID, hopefully more permanently, or at least on some level, that I'll be able to get back to that. I'll also start to do documentaries on people who make other things as well, beyond just photography, which will be great. So those things will definitely change a bit. But I don't think I'd ever want to turn my YouTube channel into a purely philosophical discussion because that's not how I started it. And I feel like if I was ever going to do that, and I am thinking about it, I think a podcast would be a better way to dig deeper on that. I haven't worked out how.
I did wonder. I thought one day Sean Tucker is going to come in with a podcast, surely.
Maybe, but I mean, I've got so much to learn and think about in that space. I'll pick your brains off, Mike, but I don't know how to do that yet. And I'm not sure, I know how to script something for a video, but that's a very particular thing. I think a podcast, you need to be a lot more, it sounds like you need to be a lot more comfortable with, if you're going to monologue something like you do on your, you're going for a walk and talking, your photo walks. I think that's a skill. Being able to just almost, ramble coherently is kind of what it is, isn't it? And keep people engaged is something good.
Well, that is what I've always thought is so strong about what you do within your films and your writing, that you can take a well-honed thought and, if you like, be able to take a wander with those thoughts and make them sound very natural. And we've spent a little bit of social time together, and you're able to do the very same socially. So I do think you'd be a natural in this medium. I really do.
It's time really is the thing, because I don't have, if I'm putting out, say, 1 or 2 videos a month, those take a particular amount of time to prep and script and everything. And I think if I was going to podcast, I want to do it more regularly than that. And I wouldn't have the same amount of time to script at that level. So I'd have to trust myself more. And I'm comfortable just talking. It's just a case of planning what I was going to say. And I've sort of toyed with doing something as a conversation with somebody else, but then it's a case of finding the right person and making sure that chemistry is good, or doing interviews perhaps. But again, I'm not sure who I'd want to talk to. So there's a long way to go yet, but it's on the back of my mind.
Well, let's drill down into the book. I want to pull one story from the very start of the book where you describe being laid down on a sandy riverbed in Africa. You paint the picture very well, by the way, as a 9-year-old looking up into the sky, the night sky, that is, and being terrified by the thought of living on a spinning rock. The moment where you found chaos and order, which is reasonably profound for a 9-year-old, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would never have used those words then. I mean, I do tell the story in the book, but very briefly, we've been told at school that week about the Milky Way. Yeah. And our teacher had shown us a picture of the Milky Way as this sort of disc of light balls in the sky. And I remember I've always had a fairly good ability to visualize something, to picture something. And she was sort of trying to explain to us how here was where we were on one of its little spiral arms. There was a point where we sat. And that when we looked at the Milky Way at night, we weren't looking at a line sort of smeared across the sky. We were actually looking 3-dimensionally into a huge, a mind-blowingly large disk of spinning suns is basically what we were looking at. And I could see that. And I remember seeing it in the class going, that's big, and kind of putting it out of my mind as being too big.
Yeah.
And then cut to that Saturday, my family my mom had been divorced for about 5 years. We were living in Botswana, just my brother, my mom, and I. My brother was about 5 years old. I was 9 at the time, I think. And we made friends with people who lived close to us. And it was a couple the father was a miner on the local mine, and they had 2 daughters. And it became a Saturday tradition that we'd load up the Land Rover and we'd drive off into the bush, and we just find a spot somewhere random. And as the sun set, they'd break out a cooler, and the adults would have drinks, and we'd have soft drinks and go running around and playing. And we found this dry riverbed. And as the sun set, we'd been running around for hours, and I was probably just exhausted. And I lay down on the sand, and it had started to get dark. It was kind of that blue hour stage, and the stars started to come out, and I saw the Milky Way, and I kind of put 2 and 2 together. So I had this knowledge which I picked up in class, and then suddenly the experience of it, looking at the Milky Way, feeling this second of absolute terror at like how big this disc was I was looking into. I'd never thought about it like a disc because no one had told me, and thinking I might fall into it. Mm-hmm. Like suddenly for the first time, questioning the permanence of gravity. And looking into this disc, and that I would never have talked about order and chaos then, but like putting it together in my head a little bit, like, can gravity just let go? Having this moment of fear, is it going to let me go? Am I going to fall into this thing some point in my life right now, maybe? Because that's when it felt so terrifying. And it was that moment where I started to question the permanence of the stuff we take for granted that's ordered. That means we stick to this rock, that we have an atmosphere to breathe, all that extra stuff.
I think I'd have been slightly more worried about the scorpions that were approaching during the blue light than the falling off the edge of the rock. But this idea, and then creativity comes from pulling order from chaos, because that's how you're setting it up, isn't it, really? You say that the reason we create is because we're making order from the chaos.
I always think about it like, and I know people use this differently, and I know at the moment there's kind of a very trendy move within psychology. Not trendy, that's unfair, but a lot of people are talking about it like you need the balance of the order and the chaos in our lives. A lot of people talk about that. Personally, I think, and again, this is super subjective, and just the way I've kind of ordered my own philosophy is I think that we're all terrified of chaos, things we can't control, that will break things down in our lives. But we don't have control. Control extends not very far beyond us. And we all feel that collectively as well. And I think we also know that our existence is temporary. The sun is going to swallow the earth in however many billion years. The universe is going to do different things over time. Our kind of window of existence is a window. It exists now, and it's pretty safe in my lifetime. But in the bigger picture, everything's very, very temporary. And this order that holds us in place and allows our existence is fleeting in the bigger sense of things. And I think we picked that up. Like we know that scientifically in this era, but I think we've always picked that up through time on some level, and it's why we threw Stonehenge up, because we're like, how does this all work? Why does it work? Is it going to stop working at any point? So everything we make, I think, is our attempts at pulling some order out of the chaos, or describing the chaos and then sharing it with each other, saying that we all see this, and it gives us a bit of comfort, feeling like we're all in the same boat together. And I think some of the drive for art comes from that, for me anyway, is trying to make sense of it all.
And so do you feel, because you also mentioned that you're never more at peace and more fulfilled than when you are being creative. They're the nights you get your best nights of sleep. Yeah,
I think we all feel that way, don't we? I think ask anyone who makes anything. That it changes your state when you've made something that you're proud of, that you're happy with. It lifts you because it makes you feel like you have some agency in the midst of all this impending chaos. You can do something. You can create something. There is also the spiritual side of this for me, in that like, when I came out of the church, I didn't throw my faith out entirely. I still believe in some kind of created order. I just don't happen to ascribe it to a glowing, slightly see-through bearded guy in the sky. Like, that's not how I see God. But I think there's whether it's intelligent design or whatever else is less interesting to me than like things are made, order is held in place, whether you ascribe that to the laws of science or you ascribe that to some deity. And the exciting part, I think, and what lifts us when we make something is we get to participate in making order, creating order, being part of how things are put together and held in place. And we get to share that with each other. And I think that's where we get sparks of divinity. We get these little moments where we can become creators in our own right in small ways or big ways. And that's why we then feel, and this is what the book goes on to talk about, we then feel a sense of being part of making meaning for each other and for ourselves.
We're back with Sean Tucker in a moment. There wasn't pomp and ceremony or any form of cake with a candle yesterday to celebrate 1 year of this podcast. In all honesty, I'm seeing the first 500,000 downloads or maybe the 500th episode as a milestone above and beyond the year. They say, whoever they are, that if you make it past 7 episodes, the point at which most just stop, then you have a podcast. We've got to 234 today, which is a sort of poetic flowing number, I guess, 234. And in this year I've spoken with photo legends, talked about photographers' personal stories, heard about their journeys, shared what picture making means, made sure to talk about mental health and inclusivity during hundreds of hours of audio. And that bank of knowledge and resource will just keep building. I've tried to offer up a cast that does more than simply Q&A too, with a Friday photo walk, a mailbag edition with music and inspiration that's designed to accompany you on your photo walks as you make pictures. So we've changed, we've moved with research of what people listen to, and we're now at 3 episodes, a main interview on Wednesday and an hour-long photo walk edition on Fridays. And of course Thursdays it's the Patreon-only diary show and the new book club. Plus that's where we play back some of the interview segments that don't air on the free stream. We have a Hollywood director there soon, he says, excitedly. So for the price of a high street coffee, you can be part of our Patreon supporter base. Get a chance to share your website or Instagram with thousands of listeners in the Patron of the Day feature, but also enjoy extra episodes on the brilliant Patreon app for your phone or desktop, where I'll also be sharing some films and pictures. The plan personally is to build on the quality and keep surprising you with guests to help you thrive creatively. And that's why we talk about the why over the how. Right, back to Sean Tucker. When I used to travel into London in the rush hour for a photo job, remember those days? I'd look around me and I'd marvel at how people could do this every single day of their life, to toil for somebody in a kind of, in my mind, I have this sort of Terry Gilliam office that they're all sort of, they're all in Brazil, in the movie Brazil, that they're all marching into. And I'd wonder how they cope without creativity and art, which is a bit of a sweeping generalization, I know, but it's always felt to me that being creative was somehow my life's glue. Is that what's happened to you, and I suppose, and then has been the cause of this book as well?
Yeah, I've always made things. As a teenager, I was sketching. That's what I loved to do. And in high school, I was heavily involved with music and also stage design. I did lighting for plays and stuff. And then coming out of that, it was big into music for a while and bands, and then it was public speaking with the church, which is a big creative pursuit, just to, putting something together and delivering a talk live. Then it was, getting into filmmaking and photography and then writing. And if you take any of those away from me, I'll find another thing. I don't think it's not the outlet that's the important thing. It's the fact that I get to keep making and participating in this. And I think we make creating too exclusive in the way that we talk about it sometimes, especially online, and this sort of label we apply, this person's a creative and that person isn't. Is a real misnomer, because I think we all have ways that we create and we make things, and some are more obvious and some are less obvious. But any time that you're sitting down trying to generate something out of nothing in your own voice, whatever that is, it could be mathematical formulas. People who say, I'm not a creative person, but I problem solve in mathematics. Yes, you are. Like there's so many ways and so many. Certainly in this book, I'm using creativity as a very broad term that hopefully encompasses a lot of different things.
Oh, it's very subjective, isn't it? One person's pile of bricks on a building site becomes another person's art installation at the Tate, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just how much value you attach to it in that case. You've set the bar high, Sean, if you think about it, for your first published philosophy project. I mean, it feels like one of those frightening college projects where there are just two words on the whiteboard, art, why, with a big question mark. You've got the weekend to solve it. How has the writing been? I mean, I think you probably are a natural writer.
It's been interesting in that it's very different from writing for video, because I think I can trust myself when I write a script knowing that I know how to deliver that in the moment in my voice. But I straight away had to learn. I sort of knew it, but I really needed to sort of drive it home, is that writing for a book is not like writing for spoken word on a video. It's a very different thing. Having written that book 10 years ago was definitely a help. I didn't have to start from scratch, but I've developed a lot as a person since then, and I think what I want to say has developed a lot, obviously. And it was a learning curve to discover what my spoken or what my written voice actually sounds like, as opposed to the spoken. So that was quite a process. It came at the perfect time. I mean, this publisher approached me at the beginning of last year. Shame they came over for the London Book Fair last year.
Yeah.
In March, got off the plane.
Oh no, and it was cancelled?
Yeah, and they were told as they were settling into their hotel, sorry, it's been cancelled because of COVID, and we went into lockdown. So they'd set up a meeting with me, so they got on the phone going, please tell us you're not cancelling this meeting, because it's now the only reason we're here in London. So I went through the hotel and we had that meeting. But it came at the perfect time, because obviously we then went into lockdown, and having that project to work on through lockdown, I mean, I started writing in earnest, I would say, in June. And then through to January, I finished writing it in January, was kind of I'm glad I had it. It was something to focus on and something to really kind of pour my heart out into. If there's a permanence to writing, and this might be only in my own head. I sort of feel like the videos that I produce, even though this probably isn't true, but they're a bit more disposable. They go past and they get left behind. But putting something down in a book, that this is what me, as this individual human being, thinks about this topic at this point in time, in this book, in this format, felt like it had a permanence to it that might live after me. That felt really good, and I'll probably change my mind as I go forwards, and that's okay. But this gets locked in here and now in this format, and that was really cool.
And did you work with an editor? Was there somebody that was advising you in that process? And how was that? Because, of course, working as a let's use the umbrella term YouTuber, means that everything is you. You decide how long it is. You decide what the tone of the piece is. It's you. And this is you plus somebody suggesting changes. Yeah,
so Rocky Nook are the publishers. And they were really helpful, actually, because they said to me quite clearly that I could use them however I wanted to use them in terms of helping shape the book. So I was quite clear early on that I thought I had a particular voice in the way I wanted to write that's slightly outside of the stuff they normally publish anyway. But I said, either I'm going to do it this way or I'm going to do it on my own. Honestly, I'd rather do it than shape it in any way, because I think people will have an expectation, because this definitely springboards off the more philosophical videos I've done. And I also want to say particular things. So I was strong on that in the beginning, which they were absolutely fine with. And then we did a couple of things. The one was I would write in blocks. So every 4 chapters, I would send those through to the publisher, and he would read through those and just give me his feedback, his sense of how it was going. And it was really helpful to get things back. Like, this story might need an extra paragraph here to kind of tie it in a bit more, because you understand it, but maybe someone who doesn't know you won't. And little things like that, because we all have blind spots. So that was helpful in terms of shaping it as I went through. Then it goes to a copy editor who goes through it with a fine-tooth comb for all the, punctuation errors, any spelling mistakes or anything that gets picked up like that. And also very helpful in terms of, and he said to me, the publisher said to me, we're going to send it to this third-party copywriter. You tell her how detailed you want to go. It's up to you. So I just said, I want to know where I'm being repetitive. I want to know where sentences are too long and untidy. Like, obviously, all the grammatical stuff and helping me shape that. And that was invaluable. Like, I now cringe to think what book could have gone out if I'd been left to my own devices. She was amazing in terms of really helping to tighten it up. And I mean, I just took 95% of her suggestions, because they were all brilliant and really, really helped. Then it goes to design, and I use my friend Vlar, who helps me design my collections every year. And he came up with a really nice, clean, hopefully quite classical, timeless design on it. Yeah. And then it goes to a proofreader, who then goes through everything after the design to make sure nothing's out of place, the whole book yet again. Then it goes to printers. So it's quite a process. It is. Kind of even after you finish the writing. But all of that really helps to kind of tighten it up.
How long did it take in the end then? If you started June, you were...
January I was finished writing on my end. The corrections and edits and stuff probably took about a month, I would say. The design really was... The template was already there. Vlad had already done that work. Putting that together and tidying everything up probably took another 2 weeks after that. Then it goes to printers and you start dealing with things like test runs and ripped proofs to sort of see how it kind of looks on the paper, and it's being printed and bound as we speak now. And then it's a case of distribution.
Your own personal situation over the last couple of months can't have been easy. You've shared on a film, so I hope I'm not prying too much here. The break of your marriage.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you were doing this or during that time. Did it? I mean, this is a book about making, creating, and how it has a positive effect on your life. Did it perhaps help you through that period?
That's a great question, actually. Yeah, I mean, on the one side, it was difficult because I'm very grateful in a way that my wife left when she did, because she left as I finished writing it. I don't know if I would have been in the headspace for a little while to be able to keep writing the way that I was. I think it would have put a massive spanner in the works. The fact that it was only editing actually helped me just focus on the technical. But while I was doing that editing, so all the writing had been done, I didn't have to generate new ideas. I just had to hone down the stuff I'd already written, which is a slightly more mindless, less generative task, so I could focus on it. There's a chapter towards the end of the book, I think it's chapter 10, I think, called Shadows. And it sounds so terrible. I made myself cry because I'd written exactly what I needed to hear in that chapter about what I was going through. Yeah. And it was really important. It was so odd because I think some people will relate to this, but when you create with words in whatever you do, you often say things that you know are true, you believe to be true, but it's academic and you haven't necessarily lived it yet. And it might come back at you later, and it's like hearing yourself as a separate person, giving yourself advice that you now know is true on a whole nother level. So that was very affecting, was reading through things that I mean, I'd been able to apply that chapter because of other painful things that had happened in my life. But now I was applying that lesson, which I'd learned in other ways, to this very present, current pain.
So had you changed it a bit then? Is that what you're saying, that you'd gone back in and altered it slightly? But
No, because what I'd said was exactly what I needed to hear, and it was proof that I'd said what I believed, and it works. It's real. It's true. Yeah. On a deeper level. Yeah. I didn't need to change a word because what I'd said about painful things that had happened in the past, reading it while I was editing it, relating it to the pain I was experiencing, I was like, yes, again. Like, yes, it was true before for every other painful thing, but I could feel how true that is relating to now, and that made it more powerful again. I didn't need to change a word. It was all there. It was good.
I had a little dig around to see what other people might say about why we create. Gina Gibney suggested that we make and create because we give power to others, and in the same kind of vein, the photographer Judy Data suggested that it's because it gives empathy when we express, and these are all very out-of-body reasons, insofar that it's not always about us. It's more about the people that we create it for. And I wonder whether you believe that's one of the reasons why we create as well, because we're giving rather than we need to receive this joy of creating and this meaning of creating that actually we might be creating because we bloody enjoy giving it to other people.
I think it's both, isn't it? It's both that. It's like an interplay. So I've got a chapter just called Feel, which talks about sort of the emotional side of how we make. And I'm a more rational-brained human being, admittedly, but I know it has to be the balance between our rational mind and our emotional state that we make from if we want to make good things. And if we're weak on one side, we need to work on the other. And that's for both. That's for when I make something, I want to make something because I want to express something I felt or experienced, or talk about something that I believe in with the work that I'm doing. So yes, I think on the one side, it is still for me. It's still to have the satisfaction of expressing that. But then, yeah, of course, it has to be how that lands with other people as well, what it makes them think rationally, what it makes them feel emotionally, how it sits with them. And of course, that's where I lose control, because everyone who takes in something I make will have a different experience with it, because it gets cut with their experience about life and childhood and philosophy about the world and how things work and experience. And yeah, it's in that sharing and the empathy we have, hopefully, for other people and how they'll experience it, and the empathy we have for ourselves and what we go through and how that shapes it. It's all in that soup of things, I think, that the magic happens. That's where art becomes something other than a piece of canvas with paint on it sitting on a wall. It's just an object. It becomes an experience, is when all that gets cut together.
You might not have expected me in the same vein as looking for Gina Gibney and answers from Judy Data to have found a hip-hop star who had something to say about this as well. And I don't know what I shouldn't be laughing about. KRS-One, who said, no, I thought this is quite prophetic, really. Putting a writing utensil in any kid's hand at age 2 or 3, they'll not write on paper like they'll be socialised to do later on. They'll write on the wall. They're just playing. That's human. Do you think creativity in some respects gets sadly taught out of some people? That some people, I mean, this is a book about the joy of making. I know you didn't call it the joy of making, but he's suggesting that it does get taught out of some people as we go through life, and they don't get to experience this joy and this empathy that you're talking of.
It's like anything we do, isn't it? People are very, very quick to apply the rules of whatever we start in. So, I mean, photography is a great example, because you'll start in photography. And I just met with someone this week who was sitting down and he's going, I feel like I've lost that early passion I had when I first got that camera. Yeah. And I got it for Christmas and I went out, I just took photographs every day, and I made a visual mess and I loved it. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted to take photographs of. I just loved the act of it. But then the minute you start going online or you attend a photography course or something, they'll tell you the rules. And they'll tell you, you need to stop doing some of that stuff that you're playing around with because it's not good. This is good. And these are what good are. And you almost have this middle period where you can, if you're not careful, lose the joy of it because you feel like you have to abide by the conventions. But then hopefully if you push through that for yourself, and those conventions are useful, don't get me wrong, but they can also be foisted on you, and you can feel bullied by them, especially by the people who insist you should do it that way. You kind of have to push through that to the point where you know what the rules are and you choose when to use them and when to break them. And you then return to the joy of it. I think then you can reclaim some of that. But I mean, the book I've written deliberately doesn't give any rules for creativity of any sort, because I think if you can approach the why of the reasons that you make and attend to the hows insofar as you're working out how you need to be thinking about what you're doing and how you need to be feeding yourself with constant inspiration and keeping yourself open. If you just attend to those things, that applies to anything beyond the rules of whatever particular art form you're a part of. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can kill the joy if the rules become too overbearing. And it does for everyone at some point, I reckon.
I would imagine there are a fair few people, Sean. In fact, I know this because I saw it in the comments below the wonderful film that you put out to promote it, that they want to hear this as an audio book or broken down perhaps as into chapters as a film maybe eventually as well. Is that likely to happen?
I won't be doing an audiobook on release, but I'm definitely toying with the idea for maybe a little while down the road. Yeah. So the publisher and I are chatting about that. And I think I might like to do it as a challenge, just to have it as something out there. And I think it might add another layer to it, actually saying it as well, especially for some people I know prefer an audiobook than a physical book to read. It's not a guarantee, but it's definitely on the cards.
It has to be your voice, though, obviously. I mean, as much as I'd like to hear Anthony Hopkins deliver your thoughts, I'm thinking that has to be you. What should somebody feel when they get to, 369 pages, isn't it? What should they feel when they get to that 369th page?
I hope that they want to sit with everything in it for a little while longer. I hope they don't just have quick conclusions, because that's not the point of the book, is like a top 10 list of takeaways. I hope there's lots of things that they've read that they need to chew on for a while. Yeah. But I also hope that they feel really excited about the idea that going forward, that they can have a better handle on themselves as a maker and be more self-aware. I think self-awareness is a big thing, I hope, that comes out of this book or anyone reading it, that they can identify quicker when they're getting into a bad space with the things that they make emotionally or psychologically, and that they know better what to do in that situation, or at least have some ideas about things that they can do to help them out of that. And encouraged and inspired is obviously the overriding thing, that they want to grab a camera and run out the door and take photographs, again, with a different mindset that's less oppressive, that they're less hard on themselves to have to create in a certain vein and return more to, like we were saying, more of the play side of things, and maybe a better idea and understanding of what creativity really is. And it's to be enjoyed. It's supposed to be a joy. It's not supposed to be a job. I mean, yes, some of us do it as a job, but that's not why we do it, hopefully, is to make money or get famous. It's because we can't help but do otherwise, because it makes us happy.
My thanks to Sean Tucker. Tomorrow we're back for Book Club and the Diary edition on the Patreon channel. Links to that on the show page. We're going to be looking at Tom Stoddart's Extraordinary Women ahead of a chat on the show that's also planned with him. And that's it for today. Keep sending your questions, your feedback and photo stories to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition, which is the Friday Photo Walk. On that note, remember you can also send in pictures from your own photo walks to appear on the episode's show page online, with links to your website and Instagram, of course. If you haven't yet, join our private, growing, very supportive Facebook group and follow us on Instagram. Links to all this and our guests and our wonderful supporters on Patreon will be on the Photography Daily show page today, linked to as ever in your podcast player app. Music on the show was from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.